An anti-Islam film sparked more protests against the US. As the anger grows, we ask why such an obscure production should provoke this strong reaction, and whether or not such films should be allowed under the rules of free speech. This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Laura Kyle. Another US embassy is attacked, this time in Yemen. Hundreds of demonstrators smashed windows of security offices outside the embassy on Thursday before breaking through the main gate of the heavily fortified compound. Now, this follows Tuesday's angry protest at the US consulate in the eastern city of Benghazi in Libya. The mob set fire to the compound, killing the US ambassador and 3 other staff members. Clashes also erupted on Tuesday at the US Embassy in Egypt's capital, Cairo. Protesters there still out on the streets Thursday, with crowds moving into the iconic Tahrir Square. So let's take a look at the film that sparked all this anger, snippets of which are on YouTube. Now, the company says it's now blocked the film from being seen in Libya and Egypt. The 14-minute trailer of what's supposed to be a 2-hour low-budget film was first posted online in early July. Called The Innocence of Muslims and allegedly costing $5 million to make, it insults the Prophet Muhammad, depicting him as a fraud, a womaniser and a paedophile. The writer and director of the film is said to be a man who calls himself Sam Basile from California. But there's growing suspicion that that name may be a cover for a group of right-wing Christians. Meanwhile, a Coptic Christian in California has admitted that he managed the film's production company. Well, to discuss whether such provocations should be tolerated, we're joined today by our guests in Cairo. We have political analyst and publisher Hisham Kassem. In New York, independent documentary and filmmaker Danny Schechter. Also in New York, via broadband, TJ Walker, a political and social commentator. Hisham Kassem, let me start with you. Your reaction, if you will, as a Muslim to this film?
Well, okay, yes, I am a Muslim, but again, I'm a believer in free speech, and I realize the difference between our societies and the West, and in the West, whether Europe or the United States, the price for freedom has been things like the Inquisition or 2 world wars, and so it's really not possible to reveal it. And then I'm also aware that there have been other films made about other prophets, Jesus or others, Moses, that would have been far more offensive had the subject been on the Prophet Muhammad. But this is not really the case here, and people don't seem to get that and seem to believe that it's possible to force legislation banning anything to do with Islam or the Prophet Muhammad in the transatlantic.
Yeah, you raise a lot of points there, and hopefully a lot of them we'll be able to discuss throughout this half hour. Just trying to get an idea from you. I understand you have seen the trailer. What emotions did it arise in you when you saw it?
Look, it's a very cheaply made film. I did see the trailer, and I would have paid more time and tried to watch the whole thing, and I don't think I would have been offended, given my political persuasions and religious persuasions. However, the film is made to deliberately provoke Muslims. In one scene, as I saw from the trailer, the Prophet Muhammad is portrayed as a womaniser with his several wives chasing him around with slippers in their hands. And next minute, he's standing there with a sword, bloodied, and like a vicious warrior, a murderer. And it just does not fit. The same person who was being chased by slippers cannot be in reality holding a sword there and tearing away at people. So not even enough effort was made in portraying the character or drawing the character dramatically, so I really couldn't be bothered to try and watch anymore.
Absolutely. TJ Walker, let's bring you in at this point. I mean, Hisham Kassem's absolutely right, isn't it? This is a deliberately provocative film on the one side, but on the other side, it's ridiculously bad quality and not to be taken seriously.
It is. If they spent $5 million on this film, somebody seriously got ripped off. But the bigger issue is that with internet, with the YouTube, the whole world is going to be sharing ideas with each other. And no matter how much you dislike an idea, one of the beliefs we have here in the United States is you have to let all ideas flow freely. We have a little expression every school child learns: sticks and stones may break my bones, but names may never hurt me. This is somebody calling names to a religious figure. And here's the thing: in America, every single religion is ridiculed. Barack Obama is ridiculed. Mormonism, the religion of Mitt Romney, is ridiculed. And there's going to be people wearing magic underwear on Saturday Night Live, a comedy show, ridiculing Mitt Romney. And there simply is, as much as you find that offensive, there is a fundamental difference between putting out an offensive idea and killing people. And if we're going to have a world that isn't marred every single day by explosions and murder, people are going to have to get this idea. In this case, I do think a Western idea is superior.
Danny Schechter, do you agree with that? Should these films be allowed? Should it simply be up to Muslims to ignore them?
Well, look, you know, to say one thing is superior to something else is already a very strong opinion with no real basis except the belief of the person making the statement and a sort of ideology of superiority, which I can't accept. I mean, as a filmmaker, the film is offensive because it's so poorly made, and it's not really a film. This is a trailer, which is a provocation. It was done deliberately and deceptively. Apparently, one of the actors says they didn't even know what the film was about. It was just a gig by a guy who may or may not be the person he claims to be, with the production assistance of a right-wing Coptic Christian organization that's out to discredit the new government of Egypt. It's very political from beginning to end. It's not about free expression. It's about propaganda. And the United States is not in a position to criticize the propaganda of others when we have so much propaganda posing as news on our own airwaves. We saw that clearly during the war in Iraq. We're seeing it today. I mean, I just watched a CNN report about Libya, which didn't report that the United States was deeply involved in overthrowing the government of Gaddafi. And not only financially, but logistically through NATO and the like. So the context of things is missing. And this is just another effort like that, crazy preacher in Florida who wanted to burn the Quran. It's incitement. It's not information. It's not filmmaking. And it's really intended as a technique of war making, not a technique of information sharing.
TJ Walker, it's incitement and not information, therefore has no place in our society?
I don't like the movie. I think it's trash. I think it's drivel. But there is a difference between being in a crowded theater and screaming fire, where you know people are going to step on each other and possibly die, versus putting out an idea that someone finds offensive. Yes, the movie is wildly offensive. And yes, to Danny's point, the United States does many, many horrible things in a military fashion, but that is all irrelevant to the fact of whether or not we are going to have a society and a world where people can put out offensive ideas. Because the second you say this idea is offensive, that's insightful, you can't have that, then someone's going to come back to you and say, okay, now you can't put your religion out. There has to be a basic principle of ideas can be put out there, and as long as you aren't advocating murdering someone or shouting fire in a crowded theater, you have to let the free flow of ideas, especially when they are offensive ideas and poorly produced and stupid, as in the case of this movie.
Okay, let's just let Danny respond there before moving back to Hisham.
Hey, TJ, listen, come on. They knew very well, the people doing this knew what the impact would be. That's the impact they wanted. They wanted to stir it up. They wanted to outrage people. They wanted to promote, the polarization of different religious faiths. That's what they say. This guy, Steve Klein, who's one of the big boosters of this film, has been involved in all sorts of efforts to kind of demean, denigrate Islam, as a political gesture. This is not about free speech in a vague, theoretical sense. This is a deliberate effort which has worked to stir up hatred. It's hate speech. That's what this is about. Now, you may think that's all speech is the same, but it's not.
These are horrible, horrible people. I share the same distaste for them that you do. But if you're going to have free speech, you're going to have an option for people that you don't like to say the things they don't like. I happen to have seen a number of Danny Schechter movies. I think they're great, but I know some people don't like your movies. I would fight to the death for your right to make your movies.
Okay, let's bring Hisham Kassem back in. Just let's go back to Cairo briefly. Steve Klein was brought up there by Danny. Interesting, because he did admit that he wanted to provoke this reaction to prove his point that Muslims are violent, and it seems exactly that these protesters have taken the bait.
Well, certainly I agree. I'm not sure what the motive was, whether he wanted to establish that Muslims are violent or whether there was a far worse motive, because this is going to come at a cost. Burning American embassies or killing American ambassadors certainly is something a nation would pay for. And it's so sad because here in Egypt, there were reports yesterday of Egyptian Christians being harassed because of this. And again, what is happening in front of the American embassy is certainly not representative of Egyptian people. This is a nation of 90 million, and about 1,000 people at best are standing out there and attacking the embassy. They are the same football hooligans who enjoy flinging a rock at a police officer or throwing back a tear gas canister at them. And the impression this is gave to a delegation of 115 American businessmen who were here to make much needed investments for the country is not going to go well. And, jobs have been lost because of that. Now, again, like I said, I'm not sure if that was the motivation, but it certainly is going to be very damaging.
Okay, I want to just take this opportunity to look a little bit more at YouTube's role in this, because even though the company has now blocked the video from being seen in Libya and Egypt, where so far we've seen the worst of these protests, it has put out this following statement, which defends its hosting of the film, and it says, "We work hard to create a community which everyone can enjoy and which enables people to express different opinions. This," it says, "can be a challenge because what's okay in one country can be offensive elsewhere." Now, this video, which is widely available on the web, is clearly within our guidelines and so will stay on YouTube. TJ Walker, given that YouTube doesn't allow for hate speech, and this did come up a little earlier, and it does seem that this film is deliberately provocative, does it really fall so clearly within YouTube's guidelines?
Look, we can't focus on YouTube. The reality is the world is interconnected. More and more people are connected online. And there are going to be people out there who have ideas that are going to be wildly offensive to me, to you, and your viewers. And we've got to figure out what is going to be the response. The response can be ignore it. The response can be produce your own video giving your point of view, or the response can be let me go kill somebody. I would argue that that last response is simply not going to be the best response. There's not a day that goes by where somebody doesn't post something on my YouTube channel saying something wildly offensive about my religious beliefs, my sexuality, my family, my mother. I don't go kill them. It's wildly offensive to me. But you simply have to ignore it. Yes, it's hateful. Yes, it's awful. But are we really going to have YouTube try to go through every single video and figure out, could somebody be offended by that? And if YouTube does that, I guarantee you there will be another video file sharing site that is going to put up everything else. That's not the solution.
Okay, but the reality exists. I mean, YouTube is a relatively new phenomenon. What is the impact then, Danny Schechter, of this material now being so widely available? It seems that people can't keep up with having to be so tolerant.
Look, if they're taking it off in Egypt, and Libya because they know that it's offensive. They know that it's irresponsible. They know it's hate speech. Why leave it on for us? You know, are we no less in need of programming? Do we need programming that inflames us to hate each other? I mean, that seems to be the impression here. Somehow we're more sophisticated. You know, there have been a lot of hate crimes in the United States because of videos like this and people calling for retribution on all kinds of levels. There has to be some sort of restraint here. And what I see is this notion somehow that, you know, everything goes and anything goes creates a society where, you know, there are no values, basically. And usually the values that are dominant are commercial values, the things that people can make money with. That's what a lot of we see coming out of Hollywood, movies that have no social value. They have entertainment value, and they're there to make money. And the values that they promote are really not values that you or I or most people would support. So, you know, there are issues being raised by this about the culture that we're living in that need to be debated and discussed. You know, TJ said before, you know, somebody criticized his mother. When I was growing up, if you criticized my mother, you had a fight on your hands. That's what it was like. We didn't allow that. That was a red line, so to speak, that provoked us to react violently.
Danny,
unfortunately, it's gone beyond that.
Danny, I know you get criticized a lot. Are you saying you go and punch somebody in the nose every time somebody posts a comment on the internet criticizing you? I don't think you have that much time.
No, nor do I have the strength. But no, I'm not advocating violence, TJ. What I'm saying is these videos do violence to us as a culture. They do violence, to a world that can potentially live in peace with each other with some degree of tolerance. What I have seen and has been reported by many free speech organizations is videos that raise deeper questions or challenge militarism and other practices being taken down or not being allowed to compete in the so-called marketplace of ideas.
So, Danny, what is the solution, though? If I could just jump in, because I'm interested to know what your solution is, because as TJ suggests, you know, these videos are out there. If they weren't on YouTube, they would be spread by other means. This sort of film is going to get out there. People are going to see them in this day and age.
Look, there's no way to stop that. But what we do need is some sort of commitment, I believe, you know, and we're seeing the diminishing of this in our country of support for documentary filmmaking that's trying to raise deeper questions about our society. Every independent has problems raising money to try to actually compete against efforts like this that are well financed by interest groups that have a desire to demean other people's religions or political positions. So we don't live in a world of equality when it comes to ideas. We live in a world in which certain ideas dominate and other ideas that are more challenging have a much harder time, unless they're scandalous like this one.
We can have a world where there is equality in the sense that anyone can put out their ideas, even if other people consider them wildly offensive. Again, I think this movie is trash. The problem is to simply say, well, that's hateful, that has to go. There are thousands of videos that go up every single day on YouTube that uses the N-word to describe President Obama, that claims he is unqualified to be here because he wasn't born in America. It's complete rubbish. It's hate, and that goes up.
Okay.
And he's able to serve. It has not destroyed his presidency. And the real problem is...
Let me just go back to Cairo, just because I do want to bring all three of you into this discussion. Obviously, we've established that people are provoked the world over. Should Muslims in Egypt at the moment, in Tahrir Square, should those men out there, women I guess as well, should they be growing a thicker skin? Should they be able to be turning a blind eye? Why are they reacting in the way they are?
Well, okay, again, but just before I get into that, on the issue of hate speech, this is definitely not hate speech. Okay. I have been employed professionally in commissions of inquiry on the issue of hate speech. This is derogatory. This is pettiness, and that's not punishable by law. And I think the makers of the film know that very well and know that they could have been sued. But one thing I take against a lot of Arab and Muslim intellectuals, they helped incite things. When I hear people talking about forcing an international legislation through the UN on all of humanity, you know that's not possible, and no government would vote for that, and yet they're out there on televisions demanding such a thing. Or when I even find the President Mohammed Morsi here, talking about legal action against the filmmakers in the United States, we know that that does not stand. And our intellectuals should, and writers, should start helping people understand that the same thing happens to other prophets, etc. in the West. This is not directed against us. And even though we might find it offensive, burning up embassies attacking embassies is not a good idea. And I can understand if people stood there silently with banners protesting the film. But attacks, etc., or this over anger that we're seeing right now, a great part of it is the responsibility of Arab and Muslim intellectuals.
And so why aren't those Arab and Muslim intellectuals having more say and sway over the people who are coming out on the street? Has there been a breakdown in religious authority amongst the Islamic faith?
Well, you know, these are turbulent times. You know, people believe this is a revolution. You should always be as loud and extreme as possible. It's the same attitude they have over other issues where they should be a little more critical of similar acts of anger, whether to do with employment or other issues. And, well, the positive thing is there has been more criticism of the attitude and way things have been handled than in the past, say with the Danish cartoons 7 years ago, for example. But it's going to take time before there is that courage to go out there and really put it to people and explain that, yes, you do feel offended, but there's nothing that can be done about this, and this is not directed against you by a nation. This is simply a small group of people who are being investigated by the Western press, the Christian press. They will help bring this to the surface.
Danny Schechter, if I could just touch on YouTube once again, because it was praised, wasn't it, quite significantly during the Arab Spring for enabling protesters to be out on the streets and immobilising them. And suddenly now, on those very same streets, it's not so welcome at all.
Well, you know, Google is one of the biggest media corporations. We have to recognize that our media is dominated by large corporate entities in most countries that have their own interest at building interests.
Okay, TK Walker, at the end of the day, do you believe that it is up to the people who are being provoked not to respond to this kind of film, this kind of footage that
you
is
can
out
respond.
there?
It's perfectly fine to respond, but respond in a non-violent way. Respond by criticism, respond by denouncing, respond by creating your own videos, make your own movies. That's the response. And I think Danny summed it up nicely, where he says, yeah, when he was a kid, when he was a child and somebody attacked his mother, it was a punch in the face. Now that he's an adult, he gets criticized all the time. He doesn't do that. As adults, we have to realize you can't make everyone in the world love you and love your religion and love your beliefs, and they're going to not like it sometimes. And there's a certain aspect of being an adult where you simply have to accept other people's ideas that are counter to yours. And what's hateful to one person is stating the obvious
Can I just
facts.
jump in one
Okay,
second?
Danny's back in the game. We've got a minute left to go, so let's just give him the voice again.
Yeah, just let's not forget what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with societies, in the case of Egypt, that have been victimized by a dictatorship supported by the United States for so many years. In Libya, a country that's just had its government overthrown by the intervention of outside powers. These are volatile places, and it just takes a little spark to set off a fire.
OK, and there we will leave it. We'll have to watch in the days to come with more protests being called for Friday, certainly in Egypt, and I should imagine other countries as well. Certainly a story to keep an eye on. Thanks very much to all our guests for joining us today on Inside Story in Cairo. Hisham Kassem in New York, Danny Schechter and TJ Walker. And thanks very much to you two for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. Any thoughts or comments you may have, do drop us a line. That's at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Bye for now and see you next time.